I'm with the band. You ever wanted to say that? I've always wanted to say that. I'm with the band. Because that's just, and when I say that, it's kind of like, that's a sign that I'm kind of nudging up against that shadow effect that Reverend Kirk was talking about. Being the talk title today is Embrace the Shadow. I looked at that and I thought, God, how could I be this lucky? What does that even mean, embrace the shadow? That sounds psychological to me. But, so if you ever wanted to say, I'm with the band, that's part of that shadow effect. And if you didn't ever want to say that, that's part of the shadow effect. Because it's everywhere, isn't it? It's that whole bunch of things that, well, conditioning does to us on this planet. Things that we really like, we see in other people that we really like, and we want to claim that for ourselves. We want to include that as part of our persona. So we put that under that umbrella side. All the salespeople in the room, you know what a Ben Franklin tea close is, you know, and on the one side you put, you know, things I want to be me, and on the other side, things I don't. Well, that's one of the things I want to be me, so. But it's a confusing subject to me. Must be confusing. That's a quote I don't want to use yet. And whenever I think of things psychological, and forgive me, all the therapists in the room, that's about 40% of us. And I know you're taking notes, and I'll hear later about this stuff. But when I get confused, I'm often reminded about, I love songs, you know, I love music. Who likes music? I mean, everybody likes music. Well, back, you know, some years ago, back in, Kirk, like the 40s and 50s, there was a song about a guy driving, no doubt a good-looking guy, because, you know, the days of Cel Mineo and like that, everybody was good-looking. And he's driving his car through town, and towns were always small and very nice and pleasant in those days. And no doubt his car had just been all washed and waxed and the chrome polish, you know, all 2 tons of this thing, because they were all behemoths back then, and it took you all day to clean them. But he's driving down the street of this town, and as he is, well, don't you know, coming down the sidewalk the other way is no doubt an attractive young lady, and as guys do, you know, he just turns his head back. And the lyric to the song goes like this. I was looking back to see if you were looking back to see, if I was looking back to see if you were looking back at me. I don't even know why I brought that up, except when I think about things psychological, that's kind of the mess my mind gets into. However, I did run across a quote from a psychologist that just clears this up. You want to hear it? Cleans this right up. R.D. Lang, psychologist, says, the range of what we think and do is limited by what we fail to notice. And because we fail to notice that we fail to notice, there's little we can do to change until we notice how failing to notice shapes our thoughts and deeds. Sure glad they cleared that up for me. This can be pretty scary stuff, isn't it? And it's not always that we fail to notice. Sometimes it's we choose not to notice. You ever notice that? Happens to me. But it can be scary. It can be scary, but it doesn't need to be scary. But because it can be, let's talk about the scary stuff first. Because, you know, let's get that out of the way. I remember when I was a young child, you know, like 8 or 9 years old, my folks used to send the 4 of us siblings off, you know, Saturday morning. We'd jump on the crosstown bus. We lived in Vancouver, British Columbia, and we'd jump on the bus and we'd take it across town to our grandma's house. This, of course, no doubt, was so that they could, well, so that our parents could come to terms with that shadowy part of themselves. No doubt wanting to release that wild inner child. and just get crazy without having to put up with 4 kids, the next morning. So we go to Grandma's house, and it was always the case that it was timed such that we got there like right at twilight, just as the sun was going down. We didn't have TV in those days. We had radio. We listened to radio programs. And one of the programs we listened to just happened to come on at about the time the sun was going down. So as that sun just below the surface, it got totally dark. The radio was already on, and the commercials now were over, and this deep bass voice came over across the air. And we're laying there on this big old hook rug in the middle of the floor, and it's pitch dark. And this voice says, "Who knows what evil lurks in the mind of men? The shadow knows." Holy camoli. Really? Why do you do that to yourself when you're like 8 years old? I don't know. I guess because you can. But we didn't have to stay there and be scared by this. And we didn't always, because every once in a while we'd get up and go watch a movie. Of course, our favorite movie at that time was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Dr. Jekyll, the prominent British physician, and he mixed himself up this little potion because he wanted to get in touch with his shadow self. He wanted to embrace the shadow. So he mixed up this little potion that he could drink a little bit of it and release his wild, inner, crazy guy. And maybe it was okay at first. I'm sure it probably was. He was probably dashing and debonair and out there, cutting a fine figure. But it got ugly rather quickly. He got murderous, and it just didn't end well, okay? This guy turned into kind of like a devil. The good news is, we know in our teaching that there really is no such thing as a devil. I'm reading this book called, coincidentally, The Shadow Effect, and it was co-authored by Deepak Chopra, Debbie Ford, and Marianne Williamson. Marianne Williamson, of course, is, a huge icon in the Course in Miracles world. And she says, we know in this teaching, and especially we know from the Course, that there is no such thing as a devil. There's no devil. That's just all in my mind. And she said, oh my God, it's in my mind? What worst possible place could it be than in my mind? That's today. I have another quote here that I have to read you because this is kind of lengthy, but bear with me because it really brings to the fore this whole thing called the shadow effect. This was written by a minister and author named William Law from his Grounds and Reasons of Christian Regeneration, written in 1739. So this is not a new thing. He says, "Who has not at one time or another felt a sourness, wrath, selfishness, envy, and pride, which he could not tell what to do with, or how to bear, rising up in him without his consent, casting a blackness over all his thoughts, and then is suddenly going off again, either by the cheerfulness of the sun or air or some agreeable accident, and again at times is suddenly returning upon him? Sufficient indications are these to every man that there is a dark guest within him, concealed under the cover of flesh and blood, often lulled asleep by worldly light and amusements. Yet such as will, in spite of everything, show itself. It is exceeding good and beneficial to us to discover this dark, disordered fire of our soul, because when rightly known and rightly dealt with, it can as well be made the foundation of heaven as it is of hell." And we know in this teaching that those are just states of mind. They didn't know that back then in the 1700s, but it didn't stop William Law from being able to see through the fog and see that this is part of all of us, and it's a part that has to be addressed. It's a part that we need to meet. We need to bring the light to it. We need to reintegrate this in a healthy way, according to our therapists, I'm sure. And I'm not a therapist, by the way. I'm like a lot of people. I could really use one every once in a while, but I'm not one. But I do know this. I know that when I find something in someone who triggers something in me, it's really not about them. God, I hate that. Because if it's not about them, who is it about? Moi. So, a dear friend of mine uses a quote, or at least used a quote, that I just love, and I've just stolen it unashamedly, undeniably, just grabbed it for my very own. But I do give her credit for it. And that's our own congregant, Arlene Hodges, when she said one day, and I'll never forget, she said, you know what? There's something about that person that I just don't like about me. And I thought, thank you, Arlene. I really needed that. I really needed to know it was me. Those things that I don't like that really trigger me. You know, we know lots of things happen in the course of every day, you know, that have no effect on us at all. We don't even think about them. They just kind of roll right off us. But when something does take an effect, when something does just light your fire, when something lights you up, pushes your button, as we say, there's got to be a reason for it. It's because that's part of you that you didn't put on the Ben Franklin clothes under things I want to be me. You put it on the other side. And actually, you didn't really put it on the other side. We don't do that. We stuff those things down. We push them out of sight. We hide them. I'm not in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I have friends who are, and I know that they have a saying there that goes like this: if you spot it, you got it. But yet, my very favorite colloquialism about this comes from that inimitable Reverend Ike. And he says, that dog that bites you is you. And that's the truth, because what happens is those parts of us that we don't want to necessarily own up to, that we do want to stuff aside, that we do want to pretend they aren't us. And some of them are just benign. Some of them are just harmless. Some of them just don't matter. But the ones that do, they're the ones that come back to let us know, here I am. I want you to just try a little thing. Try a little experiment. Just imagine yourself. Put yourself in a body of water. I don't care what the body of water is, a pool, a lake, the ocean, anywhere. And take with you a beach ball. So now you're up to about your waist in this body of water, and you got this beach ball. Stuff the beach ball down under the surface of the water. How's that working? Will it stay there? Sure it will. Until you take your consciousness off it. If you got to swat that fly, or you wipe your brow, or you think of something else, your mind goes to another thought. Where's that beach ball going? Right back in your face. That's kind of like the way this works. And the shadow effect is not, it's not all about negative. A lot of it's about positive. Like, you know, I'm with the band. Positive. Because lots of times we see something in somebody else that we really like, and we really think, God, man, I'd love to do that. I wish I could do that. That's the same thing. Only there's a positive part there that we're repressing in ourselves for one reason or another. I mean, all of us as kids, you know, we'd walk through the house and out across the yard and down the street, belting the latest song at the top of our lungs, right? Yeah, and the saying back when I used to, unashamedly go singing out in the middle of public, people would say, "Who do you think you are, Mario Lanza?" Then, of course, it got to be, "Who do you think you are, Elvis?" And I thought, "Ooh, thank you very much. That would be great." But when people do that, when we're born, you ever seen a baby that doesn't let you know exactly how it feels? Man, when a baby's happy, it's cooing and laughing and smiling. And when it's sad, it's crying and sniveling. And when it's angry, it's doing whatever it can to let you know. But we're born this 360-degree pie where we just let everything out. But the conditioning that comes to us from our peers, from our family, from our employers, from everybody that we meet, when we unleash part of ourselves, a little slice of this pie, and it's something that other people don't want to see or hear, we immediately take that little piece of pie and we throw it under the rug because we don't want it. We don't want it to be seen anymore. It's not part of who me should be. Now, I know there's a lot of therapists here, and they can all help you with this. They can all tell you how to get rid of the demons under your bed, right? Throw the bed out, sleep on the floor. We can fix this, okay? We got demons, we can take care of them. But are there really such things? No. Like Marianne Williamson said, it's all in your mind. Because we know there's only one, right? There is only one. There's one consciousness, one beingness, one life, one force of nature, one eternal, endless, forgiving, loving creator from which we all come. And within that beingness are all things. We just label them differently. We label them good and bad, love and hate, anger and joy, rich and poor. There's a Zen story about the Zen master who's got a student and he's trying to teach him the difference between rich and poor, how there really is no difference, he says. And he holds up a stick and he says, "Tell me where I should break this stick." He says, "Let's just pretend that one end of it is rich, the other end of it's poor. Where should I break this stick to get rid of the poor?" And the student, being sharp, he says, "Well, break it in the middle." So he does. He breaks it. He holds up one piece he's still got and he says, "So tell me, where should I break this stick to get rid of the poor?" And you can see where we're going with this. You can keep doing this and doing this and doing this because we don't get rid of either one. And that's not our job. That's not our task. It's not our call. Because we make the duality in our minds. There is no duality. We're all one. It's all coming from consciousness. It's really more a continuum. On one end of the continuum is all the positive, all the bright, all the light, all the love you want to have. On the other end is the exact opposite of that. But it's all part and parcel of the same thing. It's just that sometimes we sidle up to the bright side, and other times we allow ourselves to slip down a little bit to the not so bright side. And the way we fix this is we just stay centered in our knowingness that there is only one, that we are part of that one. And you and I are the same. And when I see something about you that I love and I want to emulate, I want to do that. And I should do that. Because by divine birthright, I get to do that. And if I see something about you that I don't like, that's just telling me that it's not about you. It's about me. Remember the old song, I point my finger at you. Well, when I'm pointing that finger, I got three others pointing back at me. And that's the way it is. If I see something to point a finger at, it's only because that something is within me, and very often I don't see it. I mean, who wants to own up to that sort of thing? The reason that we repress things is we don't like them. But we have to understand when we see a trigger that we need to take that, we need to bring the light to it, we need to wrap it in our consciousness, not deny it, not hide it. We have to say, hello, here, let me embrace you. I think we can get our way out of this. Our spiritual leader for Centers for Spiritual Living, Ken Gordon, has a great quote, had it in Science of Mind magazine a couple of years ago. And he said this. He was talking about mystical marriage. He said, mystical marriage is a common theme in self-development. Ernest Holmes referred to it as the marriage between the soul and the mind. Christians speak of it in terms of God and the individual. And many metaphysicians use it when describing the coming together of the feminine and the masculine. And I might just add to that, our charge is to marry the dark with the light, to marry the repressed with the open. So, I invite you to just take a second and just go within yourself, and let's just know together that in this oneness, this consciousness, this spirit from which all things come and within which all things live and move and have their being, I know that I am part and parcel of this, that I am an expression of God. I am God, being God as me. And as such, I know that every other individual is too, that each and every other person in this room and outside of this room is an instantiation of the one mind. And knowing that sometimes we feel fractured in our thoughts and in our wants and our wishes, our desires, fractured is only because we haven't brought the light to it. When we bring the light into our consciousness to embrace these seemingly untoward patterns that from time to time pick up, we then reintegrate them wholly into our system, making us whole, complete, and perfect beings. Releasing that vitality, that life force that is ours, because we are expressions of the divine. And knowing that we just bring the light to the shadow and make everything bright. And at any time we can return to that part of the spectrum that is the positive, that is light, that is the brightness that we are. We can become shining stars as we were meant to be. Knowing this is the case, it's just with great thanks that I just release this word into the law, knowing that as I do, we are already that bright, integrated consciousness. I just release this word into the law that knows only to say yes. Yes, you are. Yes, I am. Yes, we are. I release it, I let it go. And we anchor this by saying together, so it is. Namaste. Thank you very much.